The old St. Margaret's Hospital stood on a hill overlooking the town. It was a looming shadow, a skeletal reminder of a forgotten era. No one dared to go near it. Locals whispered tales of eerie lights and ghostly figures. The hospital had been closed for decades. A fire, they said, a fire that swept through the building one dark night. Many perished within its walls. Now only silence remained, and secrets. They said the souls of those who died in the fire never left. They were trapped, forever bound to the hospital. Their cries echoed through the empty halls, a chilling symphony of the damned. The air around the hospital felt heavy, oppressive, as if an unseen force weighed down on your chest, stealing your breath. It was a place where fear was born.
Last one to chicken out's a rotten egg.
The group of friends stood at the foot of the hill, their hearts pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. Halloween night, the perfect night for a dare. The moon hung high, casting eerie shadows that danced in the cool night air. They called themselves the Fearless Five, but fear flickered in their eyes, each one trying to mask their anxiety with forced smiles and nervous laughter. There was Jake, the self-proclaimed leader, always up for a challenge. His bravado often got them into these situations. Emily, the skeptic who tried to mask her fear with logic. She often questioned the sanity of their adventures. Ben, the quiet one who observed more than he spoke. His silence often unnerved the others, but his insights were invaluable. Chloe, the adventurous one, always seeking a thrill, her eyes sparkled with excitement even in the face of danger. And then there was Max, the prankster, who hid his fear behind bad jokes. His humor was a shield, protecting him from the creeping dread. Max shouted, his voice trembling slightly, "Come on, guys, it's just an old building!" He pushed open the rusty gate, its hinges groaning like a scream. The sound echoed in the still night, amplifying their unease. One by one, they stepped onto the hospital grounds. The crunch of leaves underfoot was the only sound, apart from their own breathing. The air grew colder, the darkness deeper. A thick mist began to roll in, wrapping around them like a shroud. The trees, stripped bare by autumn, clawed at the sky with skeletal fingers. Their branches seemed to reach out, as if trying to pull them back. As they walked towards the main entrance, a cold wind swept through the grounds. It felt like icy fingers brushing against their skin. It carried a low, mournful sound, a sound that seemed to whisper secrets of the past, a whisper that sent shivers down their spines. They exchanged uneasy glances, each wondering if they had made a terrible mistake. The door creaked open, revealing a darkened hallway. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the old building settling. Dust swirled in the air, thick and suffocating. It danced in the dim light, creating ghostly patterns that seemed to move with a life of their own. The air inside was stale, heavy with the smell of decay and something else, something metallic. The walls, once pristine, were now a canvas of peeling paint and rust, telling tales of neglect and abandonment. They walked carefully, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Each step seemed to amplify the eerie stillness, making the silence almost deafening. The walls were lined with rooms, each one a window into the past. These rooms, once bustling with activity, now stood as silent witnesses to the passage of time. A rusty bedpan lay discarded on the floor. It was a stark reminder of the lives that once depended on this place. A chair overturned as if in a struggle. The scene hinted at a story of panic and chaos, frozen in time. They found an old administrative office. The room was filled with broken furniture, each piece a relic of the hospital's operational days. Dust-covered files lay scattered on the floor. These documents, once meticulously organized, now lay in disarray, forgotten by time. They picked up a file, its edges brittle with age. The paper crumbled slightly at their touch, a testament to its long years of neglect. It contained the profile of a patient. The yellowed pages detailed the life and treatment of someone who had once walked these halls, a young woman who had died in the fire. Her story, like many others, was etched into the very fabric of the hospital. As they delved deeper into the hospital, they felt a presence growing stronger. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to move with a will of their own. A feeling of being watched. It was as if unseen eyes were following their every move, making the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. Their hearts pounded in their chests, their breaths coming in short, shallow gasps. The tension was palpable, each breath a struggle against the oppressive atmosphere. They reached the hospital's library. The room was a sanctuary of knowledge, now lost to the ravages of time. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with medical texts and forgotten journals. Each book held secrets, stories of medical breakthroughs and human suffering. A single lamp stood on a table, its bulb long since burnt out. It was a symbol of the light that once shone in this place, now extinguished.
Look at this. It's a diary. It looks really old, doesn't it? I wonder who it belonged to.
Chloe brushed the dust off a book and opened it. The cover was worn, the pages brittle. The pages were yellowed with age, the ink faded. It was a diary. Each page seemed to hold a story from the past. The diary of a nurse who had worked at the hospital. Her entries were filled with detailed accounts of her daily life. The nurse wrote about strange occurrences in the hospital, odd noises, unexplained events, and eerie feelings. Patients complaining of cold spots and whispering voices. They often felt an unseen presence around them, objects moving on their own, chairs shifting, books falling, and lights flickering without reason. She wrote about a darkness that seemed to permeate the hospital, a sense of dread that never left. As they turned the pages, a photograph slipped out. It fluttered to the ground, landing face up. It was a picture of the hospital staff, their faces grim and pale in the faded black and white. They looked haunted. But one figure stood out. It was unlike the others. A tall, shadowy figure in the background. It seemed to loom over the others. The figure had no face, just a blank, featureless void, just a swirling mass of darkness. It was as if the darkness itself had taken form.
Did you see that? Who is that? It doesn't look like anyone we've seen before.
Chloe gasped, dropping the photograph. Her hands trembled as she stepped back. The others huddled around her, their faces pale. They exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do next. They heard a noise then, a soft, dragging sound. It echoed through the empty hallway. Coming from the end of the hallway, the sound grew louder, more distinct. They froze, their blood turning to ice. Fear gripped them as they realized they were not alone.
They slowly turned towards the sound.
Their breaths caught in their throats.
Standing at the end of the hallway was a figure.
A tall, shadowy figure,
It was the figure from the photograph.
It had no face.
just a swirling mass of darkness.
It stood there watching them.
Its silence was more terrifying than any scream.
Then it moved.
It glided towards them, its movement smooth and effortless.
No feet touched the ground.
It was as if it were floating.
Run, Jake screamed, breaking the spell.
They turned and ran, their fear lending them speed.
They raced through the darkened hallways, the figure's silent laughter echoing behind them.
They could hear it getting closer.
Its presence growing stronger.
The air grew colder, the darkness deeper.
The hospital seemed to be closing in on them.
They scrambled through the hospital, their hearts pounding in their chests.
They were lost in a labyrinth of corridors, each one leading to another dead end.
They could hear the ghostly figure getting closer.
Its cold, ethereal presence seemed to seep into their very bones.
The air crackled with an unseen energy.
They stumbled over medical debris, their panicked breaths echoing in the silence.
The smell of decay intensified, choking them with its putrid stench. "This way!" Emily shouted, pointing to a staircase.
They scrambled up the stairs, their legs burning with exhaustion.
The steps groaned under their weight, threatening to collapse at any moment.
They reached the top of the stairs, only to find a heavy metal door barring their way. It was locked.
Panic surged through them as they rattled the door handle, but it wouldn't budge.
They could feel its cold breath on their necks. Desperation clawed at their throats.
Max threw himself against the door, but it wouldn't give. "We're trapped!" he cried, his voice hoarse with terror.
Chloe sobbed, her back pressed against the wall.
Ben scanned the room for another way out, but there was none. They were cornered.
Jake felt a surge of anger. He kicked at the door, his frustration fueling his fear. "Open up!" he yelled, his voice echoing in the stairwell.
Suddenly, Ben noticed a small window at the end of the hallway. It was partially boarded up, but there was a small opening. A glimmer of hope in the suffocating darkness. "Over here!" he shouted, pointing. He raced towards the window, the others close behind.
They could feel its icy grip reaching for them.
Ben squeezed through the window first, then helped the others through.
They tumbled out onto the roof, gasping for air. The ghostly laughter seemed to mock them from inside.
They didn't waste any time catching their breath. They scrambled across the roof, their only thought escape. The ground seemed miles away.
They finally found a fire escape and climbed down, their hands scraped and bleeding. They didn't stop running until they were far away from the hospital. They collapsed on the ground, their chests heaving. The events of the night washed over them, a terrifying wave of fear and adrenaline. They looked at each other, their faces pale in the moonlight. No one spoke. What words could describe the horror they had witnessed? They knew they had been lucky to escape with their lives. They had stared into the abyss and lived to tell the tale. But the experience had changed them, marked them forever. They never spoke of the hospital again, not even in whispers. The memory was too painful, too real to confront. The experience had shaken them to their core, leaving scars. They went their separate ways, trying to forget, but the hospital remained, a haunting presence in their nightmares, relentless and cruel. They would never forget the chilling laughter echoing in the dark, the icy breath on their necks, a constant reminder, the feeling of being watched by something ancient and evil, always lurking. The old St. Margaret's Hospital still stood on the hill, ominous and foreboding, a silent sentinel guarding its dark secrets, never revealing them, a reminder that some places are best left undisturbed, forever haunted.